Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on Fat Burning Man, where we help you look, feel, and perform at your best. What happens when Americans unwittingly eat bottomless soup? The answer will surprise you, and it's not pretty. Today we're here with my friend Andrew Miles, award-winning doctor of oriental medicine, whose work bridges the gap between traditional Chinese medicine and Western science. Before we get to our interview, here's a quick update from behind the scenes. After our ABC TV show and Google named the wild diet as a top search trend, it's been a little nuts over here. In the past few weeks, we've been featured in Women's Health magazine, Elle magazine over in Germany, Forbes, and featured in international television as well. I'll also be starring in a few documentaries that I can't talk about just yet, but they're launching soon, so stay tuned for that. I'm really excited about it. Also, Kurt, my co-star on the ABC TV show, who I'm sure you remember, texted me a link to an article recently about a man named Tommy Whitaker, which had a ridiculous but wonderful title. Man loses 100 pounds in a year with no exercise. It's like the perfect clickbait title. It's hilarious. But this is an actual article that he sent me from a San Antonio paper. So I'm going to read a few highlights because this just made me so happy. Tommy Whitaker lost 100 pounds with no exercise by strictly following the wild diet. Here's what he says in the article. The first time I heard about the diet was from watching the TV show, My Diet is Better Than Yours. Seeing Kurt Morgan succeed on the show was a big motivation. I decided to give the diet a try and I ordered the book on Amazon. We all make New Year's resolutions. A lot of those resolutions focus on weight loss or exercise. I've had trouble with my weight most of my life, and I've tried a few diets along the way. Any of the other diets I tried did not work for me, and I would quit them after a month or so, he said. Like most people, I've tried and failed. I've tried to count calories. I tried the every other day diet, which is basically a low calorie one day and then eat whatever you want the next. We also tried another diet that was low carb and low calorie, but combining both low carb and low calorie made it very difficult and even made us feel sick, Whitaker said. He goes on to say, the wild diet focuses on fresh foods that are not processed. Fresh meats, vegetables, and fruits. You do not have to count calories, and you have a free meal once a week. The article adds, some may find it difficult to grasp the idea behind Whitaker's ability to lose that much weight with absolutely no exercise, but he said it's all about following the diet. He says, as long as I'm following the plan like it's written, it's working. With the wild diet, I am able to lose weight without any exercise just by changing my diet. The thing that has helped was having my wife and son go on the diet with me. They are both very supportive, and the diet has become more of a lifestyle change. I'm very happy that my son is forming good habits now while he's young. As a result of Whitaker strictly following the diet, he managed not only to lose 100 pounds, but has gone from a shirt size 4XL to an XL, and his pant size has gone from a 42 waist to a 34 waist. Kudos to you and your family, Tommy. Allison just sent you an email, and we really look forward to getting in touch. Hopefully, you could even come on this show because I'd love to hear from you. Losing 100 pounds is incredible. We've been featuring a few stories from people over the past few weeks who have written in and done just that, but there's nothing better than reading an article like this. I'm so glad that this article is coming out right now because we need to break the stereotype that everyone who's lean is a gym rat or a cardio bunny who works out all the time. Because far more often, lean people just know how to eat clean. They have a solid nutrition plan and they stick to it. Exercise makes us feel great, but nutrition is a far superior weight loss tool. If you want to lose fat, you're going to get 80% of your results from what you eat and what you stop eating. Yes, you can have a free day and you can enjoy yourself and indulge, and that's part of the plan as well. But at the same time, there are certain foods that will just torpedo your results, and some of them are sold as health foods. So knowing what those are really helps. So if you're ready to get started with a wild diet yourself from the device you're listening to right now, check this out. We recently updated our online Wild Diet 30-day program with the best meal plans we've ever put out there. And in this plan, we share 30 days of mouth-watering meals that are designed to help you drop fat with real food. We'll show you how to reprogram your metabolism and go from a sugar burner who's addicted to sugar to a fat burner with clean energy throughout the day, which often leads to rapid weight loss. You don't need to slave on the treadmill for hours. You can lose weight more effectively by exercising less with our quick Wild 7 workouts. And you don't need to obsess yourself with eating 6+ meals a day out of Tupperware. You simply eat when you're hungry. So if you're ready to start shedding stubborn fat, eating delicious food. Get our 30-day program for a limited time discount at fatburningman.com/30 days. That's the number 30DAYS. From any device, just type in fatburningman.com/30 days. And here's a quick update that just came in from our online community, the Fat Burning Tribe. Kat says, those of you who have been here for a while might remember my wedding journey. I went from a tight size 16 to being able to wear my size 8 wedding dress with only changing to the wild diet. Well, my wedding was just featured in Rock and Roll Bride, and I had to share with my tribe. Little heart emoticon thingy. What a beautiful wedding, Kat. I know we've been in touch chatting in the Fat Burning Tribe on the Facebook group, but I'm so stoked that you dropped 8 sizes. And if you want to share your story, hit me up on social media under Abel James or Fat Burning Man. Better yet, just go to fatburningman.com and sign up for the newsletter to keep in touch. And if you want to join this group of incredible humans for 24/7 accountability and motivation, check out the Fat Burning Tribe. We just released our new 30-day meal plans, and they include no-guilt chocolate cookies, pulled pork sliders, raspberry ice cream, carne asada bowl, dairy-free mini cheesecakes, and tons more. Right now, you can join us for a discount and get wild meal plans at fatburningtribe.com. Once again, from any device, just type in fatburningtribe.com to join us. And don't forget, you can get a free Wild Diet Quick Start Guide. We just updated that with free 7-day meal plans for joining my newsletter at fatburningman.com. The new bonus downloads will make you giggle, I promise. Just sign up with your email at fatburningman.com. All right, on to the show with Andrew Miles. Fun fact, Andrew and I both spent our formative years in New Hampshire, nestled in the woods at New Hampton School. Go Huskies! This is actually the first time that Andrew and I have talked since my high school graduation speech back in 2002. So on this episode, you're about to learn why Americans never stop eating bottomless soup, how eating seasonally affects your immune system, which teas you should be drinking if you want to lose fat, how to heal in a post-antibiotic world, and much more. Let's go hang out with Andrew. All right, folks. Andrew Miles is a doctor of oriental medicine specializing in chronic pain, opiate dependence, and gut health. He has received awards from the Chinese and Taiwanese governments for the preservation and contribution to Chinese martial arts and medicine. Andrew's wife holds a PhD in herbal pharmacology, and together they work to bridge the gap between Chinese culture and the Anglo-sphere through botanical biohacking. I love that. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So we have a mutual dear friend, Mr. Rick Elkin, who taught me how to throw pots and do raku and introduced me to wabi-sabi and some sort of Eastern philosophy in all sorts of different forms. Went on to be my my road bicycling coach as well. A multifaceted man. I hear now he plays the mandolin. But you've been actually studying and meditating for a long time. A lot of what you've learned comes from the East as well. And I'm really excited to have you here to kind of bring all of this together because Lord knows the world is getting out of hand and we need something to kind of, I think, bolster our good behavior as much as possible. So I'm really happy to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me. And I think it's important not only to have good behavior, but to understand when you screw up, how to make the best of a bad situation.
Exactly. So let's start with something you mentioned in your book, which I had so much fun reading, and I'm paraphrasing here, but food marketing companies are intensely focused on how to get you to eat more. Their entire industry is designed to manipulate you. Of course, you and I do our best to reverse that damage, Andy, but let's start right there. What are we up against today?
What we're up against are the top psychologists in the world trying to get you to eat more, and also the top chemists in the world designing ways to trick your body to bypass your biological feedback loops to get you to overeat. This is like going into a casino thinking that you're going to make a wise investment decision and asking the guy at the blackjack table how you should spend your money for the next 20 years. You're probably going to come out broke. It's the same thing when you enter a grocery store. You're going to lose.
Yeah. And it's compounded by the fact that most of us are just kind of living our lives, eating or living on autopilot.
Absolutely. It's not that any of us lack the intelligence to make the right kind of decisions. The fact is, any of us, especially if we're passionate about what we're doing, we get so focused on that one thing in our lives that everything else slips in through the subconscious, and it comes down to it. And we have the decision. We have 20 minutes to buy food and eat it while we're thinking about something else, or we don't eat. And this is the reality for many, if not most people.
Yeah.
So we tend to go with our gut decision, but the gut decision can be very influenced by what's slipping into the subconscious.
And it's incessant. I'm mentioned this on the show before, but when my wife and I took about 2 years traveling around the country and the world, we noticed, if we were out in remote places, we didn't see advertisements. We didn't watch TV. We don't really watch TV anyway, but even just driving down the road, you don't see those billboards for the greasy fries and hamburger and chicken nuggets and all of that pizza and what have you. You're not barraged with it. But as soon as you come back to society, it's a hard shift, right? From the mountaintops down to the city.
Right.
So what do you do to, I guess, just maintain your sanity in the face of all this?
Well, it's harder for me because, especially in winter, I get really stupid. I'll see an advertisement after consciously trying to avoid them. I'll see something and be like, that is the best thing in the world. We need to buy that now. My wife's like, are you listening to yourself? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Especially in winter, as the cold starts to take effect, you just start to crave more calorie intensive foods.
Right.
And if you're not getting those nutrients, then you see some advertisement, and it's not just playing to what my body needs. It's playing to my emotional needs, my goals, my drives. And it can do that just within the color scheme in the background because they know what cartoons I was watching 30 years ago.
Right. It's pernicious. It's incessant. And you kind of need to put your shields up, I think, in today's society and realize or hopefully notice when you're not the one driving the behavior, right? And actually mindfulness and meditation is a great tool to teach yourself how to do that. And we'll get there in just a little bit, but I want to mention something that you brought up in the book as well, which is the study about the bottomless soup. Can you explain what happens to people?
Well, a lot of our feeding behavior has to do with our environment and our social cues. So if you're hanging out with people who are athletes and they're eating a lot, you'll probably eat at least 50% more than you're used to.
Yeah.
So with this particular study, they had a tube attached to the bottom of a bowl of soup so that the more you ate, the more it would just keep refilling. And they were studying how much people would eat before they noticed that they were just eating an ungodly amount, liters of soup. And what they found is the people had no idea. They were using visual cues to determine how much they were eating instead of internalizing the feeling of satiety.
Right. And that's just the tendency of human beings. You put down something in front of us and we're wired or we're taught to just eat what's there. And there's a great lesson in that, right? Be thankful for what you have. Don't waste. But at the same time, you go back to even the 1950s in the West and say you go out and you get hamburger or pie or an ice cream or something like that. It was probably smaller than the kiddie size today, right? Mm-hmm. Now you go out and you get a bucket of fried chicken, or you get like a triple-decker burger, or you get the supersize everything. Even you go and get a cup of coffee, at an airport, and I always ask for the small. And sometimes that thing is, I swear, 20 ounces. So we also need to be aware that you can get away with eating little bits of things that you enjoy and some amount of vice, if you want to call it that. And I would say when I've traveled to the East, you can see that on display. People are enjoying their lives and eating little bits of everything, but it's not the American-sized version of all this junk.
Absolutely. And they cut the sugar beyond half what we find acceptable here. Yeah. So Oreo tried to market their products in China, and it was so sweet that people were actually vomiting. They couldn't take that intensity of sugar.
Wow.
So they cut the sugar in half, and it was causing nausea. So they cut it down to about a quarter, and then people could take it. But the amount they would eat was no more than 1 to 2 cookies.
Interesting.
They weren't going through a pack of Oreos at 4 times the levels of sugar that a human should be eating.
Yeah.
Ever.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
Well, If you remember the movie The Princess Bride,
Sure.
that guy he builds up a tolerance to the iocane powder.
Yeah.
And he's essentially trained himself to live on poison. Well, that's what we've done.
Yeah.
The levels of sweetness that we take compared to what other cultures will be eating is enough to physically make them ill.
Yeah.
And it's something, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, what are some of the treats over there? Like what is considered a staple treat as opposed to what we find in America?
So there's a kind of sweet drink that kids are given in China, and it's called, it's two herbs called shanjian wu mei, and they're put together. These are digestive herbs. So if they're eating something that's oily, it helps the kids to break down the fats. And there have been studies on it in Japan that it actually helps to break down subcutaneous fat.
Wow.
So they do add some sweetener to that. However, because it's helping the digestion, it works out. Otherwise, people will make a really big deal about an ice cream cone. But the ice cream cone, it has such a small amount of ice cream on it. It would be something that you might get at Costco as a free sample.
Yeah.
And that's something people have once a month.
Yeah, that's the serving size is the sample size in America.
Right.
That is startling. I can totally relate to that though, because you get a coffee in Italy, same deal. It's a thimble in some cases, and other parts of the world. I remember we were in Thailand, and sometimes I'll enjoy hard alcohol of some kind. So it might be like gin or vodka or tequila, and any of those, if you got a mixed drink. So I'll get like a vodka soda or something like that with a bit of lime. And they had at the top of all the bottles, these little like thimble sized measurements of, I think it was like 100 milliliters or something like that. So a very small shot, but measured every single time. I think it was regulated by the government. I don't know if it still is, but that way, when you got a drink, you knew exactly what you were getting. It wasn't very much alcohol at all, but that's really the way that we should be enjoying alcohol or food and pretty much everything in between in these kind of little measured doses that used to be a necessity probably of economics, right, in generations past and in other parts of the world, but now are just completely out of control in most of the Western world.
Yeah, I have my hypothesis on why this is. I think a large part of why we're eating as much as we are, besides the incessant marketing that we get, is that we're trying to fill a hole that is replacing, as we're eating in order to replace those feelings of love and community that we would have in a more functional culture. And I'm not talking about East versus West, because some of my dearest friends are in their 80s. I met through the Lions Club. And they said that American life was, after work, people got into these civic groups, and that was the basis of the community. Yeah. And there are studies that when people are eating in groups, they'll eat less because you're eating and you're socializing for some of the same neurohormones. Right. You're eating for that oxytocin, for the opiates that either food will touch those opiate receptors, or the hug you just got, or the handshake, or the social interaction. They're really competing for the same space. Yeah. And so once one of those goes down, you can try to fill that hole with food and sugar. Of course, this does brain damage and makes you more susceptible to cancer and diabetes. But when we're looking at our human needs, we want to fill those the most efficient way possible. And sometimes it's easier to buy something that's oversized than to actively cultivate community. Right.
Now, the idea of kind of stuffing our faces mindlessly, is that an American phenomenon, a Western phenomenon, or have you seen that kind of creeping up all around the world?
I've definitely seen that creeping up. But when you see somebody who is eating for social comfort, it's usually somebody who's very lonely. Yeah. When I see somebody who's really obese and they have a food addiction in China, it's somebody who's been through a lot of abuse. Nobody likes them, and they're home alone with their cats. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's become a bit of a norm here in the United States.
Yeah, it does seem that way, but there's a way out of it.
Definitely.
There's a lot of promise here as well. The problem is we've been not only subjected to all of this pernicious marketing, but also what we get from the government, the nutrition principles that we've been trying to follow have been completely off base. And I love this one part of your book where you say being told to eat 6 servings of vegetables a day is kind of like being told to wear 6 pounds of cotton.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the way that food should be eaten, it's within a context. Mm-hmm. And I think now the food pyramid isn't used as much, but when I was growing up, it certainly was.
Sure.
And they were told to eat, a certain number of servings of bread and vegetables without considering people's climate or activity level. Mm-hmm. So kids in Hawaii and kids in Alaska are being told to eat the same foods at the same ratios. Mm-hmm. In entirely different climates. But if we replace those foods for different materials, we could say, all right, you need 3 ounces of lycra, 5 pounds of wool, 6 articles of leather. And then the kid in Hawaii is going to be suffering from heat stroke. Maybe the guy in Alaska is doing all right. And likewise, if you said, okay, we determined that for kids in Hawaii, so we're going to make this nationwide. Mm-hmm. It's best that everybody wears, swimming shorts and sandals. Right. And then the kid in Alaska is dying. Now, it's not as dramatic as that, but you see kids, if you go into an elementary school, a number of them just have snot running down their noses. They have allergies. Mm-hmm. They're getting chronic illnesses from a young age. And this is something I never saw in Asia. Yeah. Ever. Because people are eating according to the season. They're eating foods that enhance the immune system rather than destroy it. And this has a very direct effect on intelligence. And because families are so competitive over there, especially competitive everywhere, but especially competitive in Asia, they don't want their kids sick because they might lose school and get that much further behind. And also your immune system, it's related. It's really a misnomer. I think the name immune system is outdated. It's really a telecommunication system for the body. It has a very strong role for communication, and macrophages, which are seen to just destroy and eat away dead tissue, they find that it's part of the body's healing system and can actually rebuild tissue. So having a strong and healthy immune system, having healthy gut flora is really important for your body's ability to heal itself. It's important for having healthy memory and brain function.
Right. The body is an ecosystem, and science is catching up to that. And even, of course, public opinion is even starting to become interested in things like the microbiome, gut health. And I know that's one of the things that you like to research and stay on the cutting edge of. So what are some of the things that you've learned and applied recently as it relates to gut health and the microbiome?
Well, the microbiome of the body is very, very exciting because this is one of the areas that completely sews together ancient worldviews on health and really the future of medicine. So you're seeing that gut microbiota, when it's, let's say a stool sample is taken from someone with Parkinson's and they put it into germ-free mice, and then the mice start having tremors, you get an idea for how connected our gut microbiota is with the rest of the body, either directly by way of the gut-brain axis and indirectly through gases that serve as neurotransmitters. It's really quite fascinating. I mean, whether you love cats or dogs, there's a microbial profile for that. Whether you like extreme sports or curling up with a book, you have a different microbiota profile than somebody who doesn't. Kids in Europe versus kids in Africa have different microbiota profiles, and that changes to a degree when you move to a different climate. And this is influencing every aspect of us, from where we store fat to our personalities, our intelligence, memory. It's not to say that everything it's not to say that every problem that we have starts in the gut, but it's one important aspect of a feedback loop that's happening in our body.
Yeah. So there could be something in the water, right? In a lot of different places.
Absolutely.
Like there literally is. We're living within ecosystems, and our guts are a part of that. They're digesting things for us. They're, the bacteria in and on our bodies are responsible for, in many ways, our neurotransmitters, the way that we feel, the way that we interact with the environment, certainly, and it changes seasonally. I was talking to someone recently who specializes in looking at the gut of different animals over the season. So if you look at something like a bear who's going and trying to get fat before the winter, his microbiome and gut flora is completely different during the summer than the winter when he goes into, ketosis and is burning his body fat and just staying there to survive the elements. And then it changes once again with the season. So it's very important to get in touch with that. But it seems like in America, at least, most people don't have the tools to even know what that means, let alone put it into practice. So how can you actually help this knowledge be translated down into what's on your plate?
Okay, well, I think that we did have that knowledge.
Yes.
When our great-grandmothers came over from Europe, or our great-grandmothers who were native and were just hanging out here.
Sure.
They had an understanding of what to eat during different times of year. In fact, how many of us in the 1950s, if we had a hot dog, put a lot of sauerkraut, unpasteurized sauerkraut on our plate versus now?
Yeah. The
cultural differences are quite dramatic. And even those, what we look at as those kind of ridiculous cure-alls that are full of, Dr. McKillicuddy's bitters.
Yeah.
Those are full of plants and the chemical structures in those plants that help to increase bile to help us break down those fats. So a lot of this old world knowledge were basically relegated to being called old wives' tales.
Yeah.
And it was being replaced with a very fragile and unscientific science that was largely pushed by marketing companies. So pretty much everything that we know scientifically about diet and food, with the exception, of course, of people who in recent years have started to look a little closer, our cultural assumptions about diet are ridiculous lies.
Yeah. I like how you just went out there and said it. But yes, the idea that you should be eating 6 to 11 servings of grain, cereals, and what have you.
And a certain number of sugar, too.
Right. Yeah. As a part of your diet is ridiculous. And then special interests have also pushed out a lot of the traditional foods that we did have. So the bitters, I think, are an interesting one because I've been taking them for quite some time. My mom is a holistic nurse practitioner and does a lot with plant medicine. And so I was having a lot of bitter, stinky, weird, strange stuff from the backyard for a long time. But I think I actually developed a craving for it. And that's a real thing, right? Like bitters are something that we should be exposed to. And they actually cue your body to start doing its work and digesting and assimilating foods. It's not something that's like an old wives' tale, or even if it is, it has a lot of legitimacy. So let's talk about that legitimacy. Why do these plants help our bodies work better?
Okay, well, first of all, when we talk about plants, like plants that have a bitter flavor, we're talking about ballpark ideas. Let's say that they're 80% true. It's not 100%.
Sure.
Generally speaking, when you find a plant, or if you're just out in the woods chewing on things and you encounter something bitter, it's probably going to be poisonous.
Yeah.
And your body focuses its attention on the digestive organs. It's going to increase peristalsis to get that food through you faster. And in doing that, that by itself has an anti-inflammatory effect. The longer you hold food, the more it bumps up your nitric oxide, the more of an inflammatory effect you can get. And that's not to say that inflammation is bad. It has very important purposes, but too much is associated with obesity. So bitters will help get the digestive tract moving. It'll also help to increase bile secretion. And this is very important for breaking down fats, especially in the body.
Yeah. I remember you said there's something that's like a pizza kind of that you had over in China, and it's served with a digestive drink as well. That's like part of the deal. They don't let you walk away without it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. When Lon and I were working with a research and development company for plant-based medicines. And at that time, we were working about 16 hours a day. I mean, it was just kind of insane. We were working on this project. Just like most Americans, just didn't have time for anything. There was this place on the corner that had kind of these Silk Road pizzas. So they're just oily, kind of probably the predecessor of pizza, Central Asian kind of food.
Yeah.
And I would go to buy one, and they would say, no, you can't buy this unless you buy the drink. And I'm like, fine, how much is the drink? Yeah. Like, no, it's included. This is just, we're just doing our social good here.
Yeah.
And it was so greasy that you could just see through the bag. I mean, this is a vice, definitely a vice kind of food. This is thinking more than you're moving will cause you to crave ridiculous foods. And this was one of them.
Yeah.
Just like, oh, to heck with it. Okay, we're going to eat this. But when we had this drink, which is made of two fruits called shanja and wumei, and what these do is help your body to break down oils and fats and make your body assimilate it. Instead of, if you get too much fat, it serves as a preservative and your gut microbes can't really get into it. Mm-hmm. So we would eat this and two things would happen. One, we were able to digest it with no problems. Our energy levels would spike and we wouldn't feel like eating dinner because the drink itself was helping the body adjust the energy balance. And really, when you're too fat but have no energy, that's not a problem of anything besides energy balance.
Yeah.
If you're exhausted and can't get to sleep, that's a problem of energy balance. And so by using these herbs or fruits that are part of the culture, you're able to literally have your cake and eat it too. You're able to digest it, assimilate it, get the best properties from what you're eating to where they should be, get rid of the rest, and call it a day.
Right. And I like how you mentioned that it's a primitive pizza and kind of a primitive drink, because if you extend this to where we are now, you can kind of see how we got here. Because you go out and you get something that's big and greasy, say a burger, right? And it comes with a fizzy drink that has some sweetness to it. But, Dr. Pepper is supposed to be, I don't know, what is it, how many flavors or something like that. It's all chemicals now. But it used to be, if you go back, these were all elixirs and bitters and things that helped us actually assimilate that food. But now it's just a perversion of it.
And I think it's really slight changes that cause the difference between being able to digest a heavy meal and having it sit in your gut and rot your body.
Yeah.
When I went to Germany the first time, people were eating many of the same foods that we might eat in the Midwestern America because they're the same folks, really.
Yeah.
The difference was in Germany, nothing was pasteurized.
Okay.
The second was after the meal, instead of having a Diet Coke with it or something ridiculous like this, I had warm Jägermeister or a similar type of liqueur that's full of digestive bitters. Now, when you take an iced drink, it's similar to icing your eyeball before taking a vision test.
Yeah.
You're putting ice and cold right into the digestive organs that need blood to do their work. So the traditional European way of eating fats and bratwurst and all kinds of delicious bloodwurst and whatever else was to follow it up with the digestive liqueur that helps you to break this down.
Yeah. So there's a lot that we can learn to reintegrate this into our lifestyles. And it's not that difficult, like having sauerkraut in the fridge. If you take that step and it's actually in your fridge, you're like, what can I do with this? And you get creative. I've had it with eggs. You have it with meats, of course. I'll have it by itself, especially if I'm, coming off fasting or under eating for a time. Having a little bit of that salty fermented food seems like it's just what the doctor ordered. And it's amazing. You can feel that your body is operating differently when it gets these tools.
Absolutely. If I want to drop weight quickly, what I'll do is either not eat dinner, do some intermittent fasting. But in the beginning, when you start that, your body isn't quite happy with you.
Right,
but if you have some kimchi or sauerkraut, it takes the edge off, increases your digestive capacity, and then you wake up with a lot less fat on your body.
Yeah. And you also mentioned fermented teas are particularly effective for fat loss and digestion and assimilation. So pu'er tea and oolong, I think, are the two standouts, right?
Yeah, there are, of course, many teas that work wonderfully for helping gut microbiota. They serve as prebiotics. But the more fermented they are, the more benefit you tend to get.
Yeah.
So there was a study in Singapore, I believe it was, and they studied the ability of different teas to affect fat loss. So pu'er tea seems to clean the blood a little more, whereas oolong tended to take away more of the adipose fat. And it's important for people to remember that when you're losing fat, it's not just about what you can pinch on your belly. Sometimes you can pinch less on your belly, but you have more fat in your blood, or you have more fat around the organs, or it's more marbled into your muscles and you flex and it looks great, but if you were to, you've got a marbled steak going on, so it's still not quite that lean.
Yeah, a marbled steak. There's an image for you right there. But that's what we do have going on. And I think it's important to also emphasize the fact that we're not disconnected from our food. We're not disconnected from the fat on our bodies. All of these things are active, right? And they're changing the way that you feel. They're changing the way that you think. And I think at least the times that I've traveled to other parts of the world, it seems like there's more of an appreciation that this is all a web, that this is all connected. You know, you see, certainly when you go to places in the East, and China, Thailand, Philippines, you see ducks hanging, you see dead animals, or you see live animals, and right after you order it, they're running out behind the back, chopping the chicken's head off, and eventually that becomes your curry, either right then or that evening. And there's also, because there's less distance between you and your food, or you and your life in general, there's more appreciation that it is all connected. That kind of lends itself to a different type of spirituality, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, absolutely. People want the food that's the freshest.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter what a marketing person says. In China anyway, I would buy groceries. I would ride an electric bike home.
Yeah.
And at a stoplight, if I was actually stopping at a stoplight, it's kind of optional sometimes. And
right.
There's a guy on every street corner selling vegetables that he biked in from his farm.
Right.
So it was picked that day. You get it and you eat it that night. And sometimes my mother-in-law would go out and get vegetables that were just cut an hour before, and then we would eat that for breakfast.
Yeah. The difference between that and what that does to your microbiome compared to, produce that's been shipped across the world that might be more than 12 months old after it was gassed with ethylene and, slathered with all these chemicals. The implications for your body and your health moving forward are incredible.
Yeah, from a traditional standpoint, what they would say is that there's less qi in the plant. Now, through more chemical analysis, we have a better idea of what qi is, or what those different, qi literally means gas. So plants are always putting off gases of one type or another, whether it's auxins that are hormone-based gases to tell the other plants to ripen, or just carbon dioxide, etc. Every living thing has an intimate relationship with the gases that surround it. And the longer something is on the shelf, and the longer you're using gases to kind of preserve it, those are preservatives that your gut microflora are also going to have a hard time getting into. So generally speaking, if it's designed to be preserved, your gut microbiota is going to have a harder time getting at it. And whether that's, even if it's a so-called fresh vegetable that's been preserved in a gas that now your body's going to have a hard time getting into, or it's, if you look at the traditional way that anything is preserved, high amounts of salt and fat, those are all preservatives. Even having, some kind of GMO food, those are designed to be preserved as long as possible. And just keep in mind that that'll take longer for your gut to get into. I'm not saying all of those things are evil. It's not that cheese is evil, or, GMOs are necessarily evil, but you just need to respect that it will take a longer time for your body to get into. And having a respect for the food and your relationship to it means that if you're not going to eat what's best for you, then you're going to have to do a lot of work to make up for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a good way to think about it. It's, you can get away with some amount of vices or processed food or what have you, but you're going to have to work for that other percentage of your diet or your lifestyle or exercise or what have you to kind of make up for it. But we all have this quota. I think the problem is, if it's 10 or 20%, most Americans are living in the 60 to 70% just by default, where that's the majority of their diet. And if you see a vegetable every once in a while, it's probably not one that was alive an hour earlier. But there are a lot of things that we can do to improve our own situations. One of the things, especially based upon your wife's work, I'd love to get into with you is about the promise of plant medicines versus medical treatment or versus drugs. So a lot of people don't necessarily work herbs into their lifestyles, but what are some ways that you do that with the people you work with?
Well, there are three main ways that herbs are used in East Asia. And I would say the most common way is that the herbs are used alongside with Western medicine to take away the side effects of Western medicine. Now, one of the questions people have is, if medications often are based on plants or come from plants, why don't you just take what's good out of that plant and then leave the rest to rot in the field? And the answer to that is that when you look at the chemical structures in a single herb, not to say 20 put together, but just one herb, you may have 20 or 30 chemical compounds that are all very similar, but some keep the others in check.
Right.
So let's say with mahuang, herba ephedra, became really popular. People are using it for weight loss. Don't use it for weight loss. It will hurt you. If you look at the whole plant, the top half of the plant increases heart rate and increases sweating. The root of that plant is the antidote to the top part.
Wow.
The root slows the heart rate and stops sweating. So people will come in sometimes and they have a sweating disorder. They're just constantly sweating. And if you give them the root of that plant, it'll stop the sweating.
Wow.
When you look at the formulas as a whole, you have hundreds of chemical structures coming together in very unique ways. But still, you can't just isolate the chemical structure that you think is important, because the others are kind of there in the wings to make sure that it doesn't go too far in one direction or the other.
Right.
The other aspect is that the plants have polyphenols, and just the texture, the little bits of the herbs that you're getting are important for your gut microbiota. So if you take a herbal formula, it's going to help repopulate your microflora. Whereas if you take a pharmaceutical intervention, if you take a pill, that's going to do damage to your microbiota. And it may need to do that to save your life. I'm not saying that, one or the other is bad. I'm not making it a religious kind of decision here, because the way that people in Asia use it is more, okay, I'm going to take these antibiotics. It is going to completely destroy my gut. And then I'm going to take this to repopulate my gut. It's something that's going to enhance the survival of those positive microbes. What they found with some of these traditional formulas, not all of them, some of them are complete garbage. I mean, if you look at, they do studies on the formulas in China and have been since the 50s. They'll do mass clinical studies, and they'll give one group an herbal formula, and they'll give another group the medication. And for the most popular formulas that are still in use today, that have been used for the last 2,000 years, they tend to work statistically similarly, which means that they work about the same, only they don't have the side effects. So they may give somebody an antiviral, right? And then they'll also give them the herbal antiviral. And the Western medical antiviral, say interferon, will do some damage to the liver and kidneys. The Chinese medical formula that, let's say in the case of Xiao Chai Hu Tang, was invented literally 2,000 years ago, it not only works as well, they work synergistically together, and then it takes away the side effects on the liver and kidneys.
Wow.
So as a result of this, it's the same thing with cancer therapies. I wouldn't recommend that people take herbs by themselves. Let's say that for a certain type of cancer, the herbs are 20% effective alone. And then Western medicine is 20% effective. When you do them both together, you get the effective rate up over 50%.
Interesting.
So it's more than adding them together. And one of the reasons for that is because during the attack strategy phase, say for cancer therapy, the Western medicine is way better. So people have an idea, a misconception that plant-based medicine is all natural and happy and full of fairies and happy thoughts. That's nonsense. Traditionally, people used a combination of poisons from snake or scorpion. They were more volatile. I just needed to say that because as I provide information about how wonderful herbs are, that's not to say that it's the best thing to do if you have cancer. Again, it's not a religious decision. You have to use them both intelligently. But what they found is that people can go through twice the amount of chemo or twice the radiation, because in between bouts of those attack strategies, they take herbal formulas that help to restore the gut flora, help to improve energy balance, help to restore the white and red blood cell counts. And as a result of doing these together, the results are much, much better. And same thing with weight loss or any chronic disease.
And I think that's the promise, using both intelligently, not saying that, Western medicine is evil or that plants don't work, but combining both of those together. Because, there's a massive difference. This is just an example, but when we were in Peru, coca tea, the coca leaf that they make cocaine out of, is kind of a mild stimulant, less intense, I would argue, than a cup of coffee, but it actually helps you acclimate to being up on the mountains with thinner air. So we would have coca tea almost every day, and I've never had cocaine. I don't plan on ever having cocaine, but what I've been told, it is nothing like that experience. But when you look at what the coca leaf is, it's an intact plant, and it comes, like you said, with all of those different compounds in the amounts that they, that would be reasonable in nature. So it's almost like a built-in fail-safe, right? When you start to purify all of these different compounds, or certainly a single compound, all of a sudden your body doesn't know what to do with it if it's offered in vast amounts all at one time or on a regular basis, and you don't get those cofactors. You don't get those other compounds that kind of keep everything else in check.
You brought up an interesting point, too, that it helps you to acclimate to the altitude. What they found is that plants, this is an 80% generality, plants from high altitude will tend to increase hemoglobin in the body, because plants share so much DNA with us that if you want a plant that's going to help you, let's say that you have a fungal infection, then you go to the swamp and you find an herb there, because herbs that are in very swampy areas will they have to deal with rotting just as well as you might. So they have bark that is just packed with antibacterial, antifungal, and antiviral compounds to keep themselves from rotting. As a result, when you make a tea out of that and drink it, you're getting those antiviral, antifungal, antibacterial effects. Herbs from the Tibetan Plateau, where it's really high up, Switzerland, the Andes Mountains, they tend to increase hemoglobin because those plants have to respirate at high altitude, and we can use many of those same chemical structures because we're, I think, 70% related to plants as far as our DNA.
Yeah. I can't believe it, Andy, but we are coming up on time. Before we go, I do want to ask you, in the face of an increasingly uncertain modern world, what excites you about the future of healing?
What really excites me is that we're coming to a place where we're at the edge of the era of antibiotics. All of modern medicine is on the foundation of antibiotics. And we're coming to the edge of that and looking at a post-antibiotic world because of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And because of globalization, a kid in Mexico who's having a bad time in life can harbor a disease that can spread through the United States. There's no separation at this point. And so when we look at the future, we have to understand how to balance our own microbiota, how to use plants in our environment to adjust ourselves with enough biodiversity so that when, not if, but when an epidemic comes through, as it has every time we increase in population, that will be the information that really helps us to preserve and progress to the next stage.
Yeah.
And what I really find beautiful too is we have ideas in Chinese medicine like qi, and then you have ideas in biomedicine now like gasotransmitters, and they're finding that it's really the same thing.
Yeah.
And then you're looking at plant-based medicines, the structures that they're using. Now Western medicine is starting to combine different medications together in combinations of 2 or 3. That was where Chinese medicine was 3,000 years ago. So it's not to say that it's necessary to use a Chinese medicine formula, but the ideas and strategies that are there can really point the way to the future. And that's what I really feel so impassioned about. And that's why I was saying before, we were working 16-hour days. It's not because we like having a horrible work-life balance. It's because creating a bridge from this ancient knowledge base into the future in a practical way that all of us can use here may be very essential for all of us in the future.
It's tricky, but essential, and you're definitely helping with that, Andy. So thank you so much for coming on the show. Before we go, please tell folks about your work and where they can find you.
If you go to enlightenweight.com, you can find a link for our book, and also there's a walkthrough where if you want to get the main ideas of the book but don't necessarily have the time to delve into it, you can get some of the main ideas about how to balance your microbiota For further reading, you can look to enlightenweight.org, and we have an upcoming podcast that is called Botanical Biohacking, if you want to know more about the interactions between plants and how you can best use plants and the ideas behind plant-based medicine to enhance your life.
Dr. Andrew Miles, thank you so much for coming on the show. You're welcome anytime. This is awesome.
Thank you so much, Abel. Good to see you.
Before you go, don't forget to grab your listener discount on our 30-day fat loss plan. In this plan, we share 30 days of mouth-watering wild diet meal plans that are designed to help you drop fat with real food. The meal plans are paleo-friendly, easy to make, and literally the meals that my wife Allison and I eat just about every day and night to stay lean, fit, and happy. In the program, you'll get the most effective method of meal and nutrient timing to best stimulate fat loss and muscle recovery, the truth about how much protein you really need for your body type, 30 days of specific healthy fat-burning meal plans as a done-for-you nutrition strategy, and tons more. If you check it out today, you'll even get a listener discount. All you have to do is type in fatburningman.com/30 days. That's the number 30, DAYS. Once again, that's fatburningman.com/30 days. I'll see you there. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Fat Burning Man. If you liked it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, the podcast app, or wherever else you might be listening to or watching this show. Got a second? Please leave me a quick review on iTunes. I always love hearing from you, and if you think someone else might like and benefit from this free show, please take a second to share it with a friend or with a family member. You can get in touch with me on Twitter at FatBurnMan and Facebook by typing in Abel James or Fat Burning Man. Drop me a line anytime. Did you know that I've recorded over 150 episodes of Fat Burning Man, winning 4 awards in independent media and hitting #1 in more than 8 countries? And here's some more good news. You can download and listen to every single episode for free. All you have to do is type in fatburningman.com. I'll give you a second to type it in, fatburningman.com. And you'll get all the show notes in video and audio versions for all the past episodes of Fat Burning Man. Better yet, enter your best email at fatburningman.com, sign up for my newsletter, and I'll even send you a quick start guide to start burning fat right now and a few of our ridiculously tasty recipes as a special thanks for signing up. Once again, just go to fatburningman.com right now, enter your best email to get your free fat burning download straight to your inbox, and make sure that you never miss a show again. This is Abel James signing off. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great week.
Polysaccharides in their products and so on, but there are other things that are polysaccharides too, like maltodextrin, and dextrose, and grain, and so when somebody says, well, the mushroom product says, oh.